So the applicants are here. Greg Rothstein, if you could just please accept the request to promote to panelist. Applicants are
Okay, we are live on YouTube.
All right, great. Welcome back to the afternoon session of the November 9th, 2021 public hearing and public meeting of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We are going to resume our public hearing agenda this afternoon, beginning with public hearing item number 8. And I will turn it over to Caroline Kane-Levy, Deputy Director in Preservation, to take us through the afternoon agenda.
All right, thank you, Sarah. We're going to be starting with item number 8, docket number 20-00052, an application for 143 West 72nd Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District, Borough of Manhattan, Block 1144, Lot 15. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness. It's an Art Deco style commercial building designed by Boak in Paris and built in 1935, altered in 1989 by the Penta Group. Application is to modify and legalize rooftop and rear yard additions constructed without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits.
okay. The applicants have joined. If you could just please unmute yourself. You now have control of the screen. You just have to click on the screen to advance the slides. So Mr. Rothstein, if you could just unmute yourself and just please click on the screen.
Okay, controls. Yes. Hello, commissioners. Sorry,
Hello.
I'm new to this, so bear with me. I'll have to find the controls. I lost internet connection for a moment there. So my name is Greg Rothstein, and I'm the architect for this project. As you can see from the initial screen you're looking at, this property has gone through a number of changes. You can see the 1940s tax photo showing a two-story building that was constructed. And in the 1990s, another floor was added, 2 more floors were added onto the building. There was a setback at the top floor. The building didn't extend all the way to the same height as the adjacent, but was lower than the adjacent buildings. And then you can see what the actual image on the right of what it looks like right now, where a addition was put on the top of the building and in the rear, and I'll talk about those in a little bit. They added to the top of the building another 4 feet that's visible from the front, making it now align with the adjacent buildings. And I want to point out that this is my initial involvement with this building. I was not involved in this building prior to trying to clean up some confusion and some issues raised since the 3 additions were made to the building. I just lost the...
Apologies, my Zoom crashed. I'm just going to bring the screen up again. Just one moment.
Okay, and if someone could tell me how you advance to the next slide, that would be...
So you have your mouse on the screen and you can advance using the arrow keys. So if you just click on the screen
right?
and then use your arrow keys.
I don't have arrow keys.
So on the keyboard, sort of where it's
Oh, on
up
the keyboard
down.
arrow keys. Okay. Thank you. um, this is, I thought it important also to give a little context because the extensions that were done in the back and on the roof, it's helpful to see 72nd Street has also, on a whole, has gone through a lot of changes. And part of that is even 73rd Street. This picture is taken from a 13-story building on 73rd Street. This is not a drone picture. This is a picture from a very tall building that's part of the buildings on the block. You can also see that there are also a number of already existing commercial buildings. Like this building, what has been a commercial building without any residential in it. There are other buildings on 72nd Street on this side of the block, which are also all commercial buildings. And you can see that a number of the extensions are, it's not your regular donut with little extensions running through it. And I thought it was important to be able to see that up front. Okay. Oop. Sorry. And here you can see the colors represent different heights of different portions of the building, and you can see all along 72nd Street the number of existing encroachments on that rear yard and the varying heights of those extensions and the main buildings running up and down the block, up and out 72nd Street and 73rd Street. And you can see where the red arrow identifying where 143 fits into that block. And here we have an enlarged view of the immediate buildings surrounding 143 and the number of the variety of extensions into the donut in the backyard. This is a extension, a section through the building. What I found no plans in the building department or no record exactly what was here prior to the current condition. I have no way of knowing exactly what and where the what was added exactly. So we were assuming that this is where the third and fourth floor and roof bulkhead were located at time of designation. The parapet at the front, in front of the existing stair bulkhead outlined in red, you can note is very high. I don't believe that what was the existing roof, the framing changed, so that the height of that floor remained in that location. Here you can see where that outline, still outlined in red, where that roof bulkhead was located. And you can see in the darker colors what was added on the roof, and added, the bulkhead moved one floor higher, and where it was extended on the third and fourth floors. Also, you can see that there are a couple of little items that, working with staff, we have modified. One of them is a flagpole that was sticking out of the building at the moment and was not part of the designation. And so we're removing it. There's also a metal flue, which is projecting out of the front of the building. It was for a gas water heater, He's going to exchange that for an electric water heater so that that flue won't be necessary anymore and won't be visible from, it'll be gone. Here we have a view looking southeast at the back of the building, and you can see the bulk of the immediate adjacent buildings to 143, which sits in the middle. You can see certainly the one to the east is of a similar bulk as this building. And we did a view from the other side, looking southwest, showing, giving you more of an idea of the bulk of that, of the adjacent building. So as part of what we're proposing, it was noted before the community board, we went to the community board without changing anything about the front of the building. And their suggestions were that something had to be done to what was added on top. Just keep in mind that except for the top 4 feet, this was already existing at time of designation. So what we're proposing to do is take some of the vocabulary from the existing facade and apply it to from the setback up to the new roof level by removing the ladder that was there that really served no physical purpose, and taking some of that vocabulary and scoring and applying it to the top 2 floors. And here it just shows the progression of what's there, what was there, what is there, and what we're planning on doing, going from left to right, and just pointing out the same things that I just said. There is a door from that terrace, from that setback, which is not visible from the street because of the parapet in front of it and the setback. It pretty much hides that door, which was existing. The back of the building, as it is currently on the left, has a number of challenges to it. There are a mix of materials. There's some brick with some waterproofing at the bottom in kind of a dark gray. There's a fire escape that really was not painted or treated at all. And there are places where there's on either side of the 2 air conditioners at the roof line are exposed corrugated metal. And what you'll see on the right is where we're proposing to stucco that portion above that's not brick and paint the back of the building a beige color and paint the fire escape black. We're also adding a railing at the top to protect the occupants as required. Other views of the back of the building showing the existing configuration in the surrounding area. So this is on the left is our assumption as to what the previous elevation looked like, and the current rear elevation in the middle, and our proposed changes to that elevation on the right. laying out pretty much what I just described, painting the fire escape and trying to redo the portions of the back of the building. So the extensions in the back aren't visible from the street. The new bulkhead on the roof is not visible from the street. Obviously the 4 feet above what was at time of designation is the only portion that will be visible from the street. And here we have a number of street views going up and down the street. This is the current roof. And on the lower left, you can see the setback and the flagpole. And to the right of that picture, you can see the top of the ladder and that metal vent that we're proposing to remove. Some additional pictures of the current roof. The current pictures of the current top floor of the building. Some more pictures of that setback and that terrace. The rear yard of the building is very small. It contains a little areaway which actually has doors which access the cellar to allow you to clean out the yard and I guess service the air conditioning equipment that they've placed back there. And this just shows the difference between the current aerial view plot plan of what was there and what is there currently. Current plan of the cellar. Let's move on. The first floor, second floor, third floor. The third floor was added, 11 feet was added to on top of what was an existing roof. And the fourth floor extension, which added approximately 17 foot 9 inches. The new floor, which was added, the new 5th floor, which reused the existing party walls on each side of the building and did an infill between the existing adjacent buildings. And the current bulkhead, which would be below, would have been below, and our current roof plan showing the bulkhead and an elevator bulkhead. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Okay, we have some questions. Commissioner Gustafson?
Do we know what year the illegal addition was built, the rooftop addition?
What year it was? I'm not sure. There were some permits issued for some interior work in the building, which I believe would have been around the same time as the additions were added.
Yeah, I think you actually answered my follow-up question. Is this a new owner?
No, I don't believe it is. No.
Thank you.
All right, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Gustafson? You have
I'm
another
sorry,
one?
sorry, I was trying to lower my hand.
Oh,
There
okay.
we go.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions at this time, so let's move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony this afternoon.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with the first sign up from Landmark West. Sean Corsandi, I have promoted you to panelist. You can unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee vehemently opposes legalization of work installed without LPC permits. When property owners ignore the landmarks law and make changes without the Commission's guidance and consent, all too frequently the results are at best unremarkable and at worst destructive. Additions, in this case, are the former. In either case, the practice of legalizing alterations after the fact, in essence, penalizes property owners who often go to great lengths to comply with the landmarks regulations by rewarding those who flout the law. Specifically in the instance of 143, originally a row house that was twice altered, refashioned as 2 stories in deco garb, expanded to 3, mimicking the original faceted windows of the deco Horn and Hardart automat across the street, and then expanded again prior to this latest expansion, we are confronted with a drab, skimmed brick wall with a service ladder as its greatest detail. One would hope that had the proper channels been followed, and with LPC guidance, the result could have been more than the current illegal blank wall. Although the rear facade alterations are an improvement over the existing, would they be approved if they only existed as a presentation of CAD vector lines in PDF format? Our committee does not think so. Similarly, multiple blind stories of stucco on a primary facade, is that befitting? In a word, no. This may be why there is no similar site precedent within the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District, reportedly the most varied and second largest of any historic district citywide, to cite as a reference for such an approval, save for perhaps also a bulky Paris building, the individually landmarked Midtown Now Metro Theater, which does a much better job. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee recommends denial of this application for legalization. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'm going to bring in Michelle Parker, promoting you to panelist. Michelle, you can unmute your mic and begin to speak and state your name for the record. Michelle, you're in the meeting. Okay.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Michelle Parker from Community Board 7. While in general, we will approve retroactive work that was done on a building. In this instance, the Community Board disapproves the application as inappropriate to the historic district because there's no fenestration on the front facade at the 4th and 5th floors and the rear facade at the 2nd floor. The addition of massing and bulk through the addition of the 5th floor and the extension of the rear facade to within about 5 feet of the rear lot line and the cladding of the entire rear facade in stucco makes us pause. But our board did disapprove this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to take a glance over. I do not see any more hands raised, so that is it for the signups.
Okay, great. And right, those are the only letters that we received as well. Okay, so Greg, would you like to respond to the comments?
The only comment I can make, the stucco front was at time of designation. The portion that was added actually brings it up to the same height that even before this new building was constructed, before the 1940s or 1920s, when the building was constructed, there was, I'm assuming, similar buildings on either side, and we're actually bringing it up to the same height of the adjacent buildings to then have that roof line continue. But the material was the same material that was at designation.
Greg, how many feet is that? Did you say 4 feet?
4 feet.
That it was extended? Okay.
Correct. And what we're trying to do is take some of that existing vocabulary, as I mentioned, and apply it to that stucco so that it isn't just a blank stucco wall anymore, but that it does take some of that existing vocabulary and apply it there. At the community board, we did not show that. That was something that we added to the proposal on the front. And as far as the backyard, the existing backyard is very small. At time of designation, it was a very small backyard. We're not changing the size of that at all.
Okay. And maybe if you could go to the section again, I just want to understand if there were a design that had windows, or would you have considered windows if they would correspond to floor levels behind that wall?
There is a stairwell and there is a kind of a bedroom. The use of the top floor is for a caretaker's apartment. So there's a small, as you go to the floor plan.
You have control of the screen, so you can
Oh,
move
okay.
to the appropriate slide.
Okay. I'm hitting the down arrow and it's not moving.
Just click on the screen and then you can use the arrow.
Okay. There we go. So at the front of the building, there's a stairwell and there's a small bedroom that has a little clear story at the top to provide light and air. The existing didn't have windows, so we weren't really proposing to break what was existing at time of designation and change that by introducing a whole new element of windows at the front.
Okay, and at the rear, can you go back to your sort of massing models that just show the rear? And I know that based on your understanding, which I know some of this is guesswork, it previously had been stepped and slightly smaller at some floors than the neighbor, and it was sort of bumped out. And it has, how tall are those parapet walls around the top of it?
I don't have the exact height, but they're somewhere between 3.5 and 4.
Okay, so if does your roof level on the top of that addition align with the roof level on the adjacent addition? I'm just trying to understand heights.
Approximately, but that
Okay.
roof, that addition is like this little house with a sloping
Yep.
roof. So it's not exactly analogous.
Right. Okay, commissioners, any other final questions? All right, I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to start requesting to unmute you all so we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. Oops. All right, Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And so this is a building that, as has been presented, has been altered a lot over time. It was probably originally a row house. It became a 2-story commercial building and then subsequently added to in height over time at a setback location. And since designate and in a very blank wall, and since designation, without permits, an additional 4 feet was added to the top of that blank wall, behind which are additions that we can see in this slide that's before us now. And the proposal is to modify the front by adding stucco and detailing that correspond to the facade below, and to legalize the alterations that were made at the rear. So we'll begin our discussion, and I think we can talk generally about height and bulk. And on the front, it's a 4-foot height, and then design of both aspects, front and back. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to start this one?
Yeah, sure. This seems to me to be, this is pretty straightforward. If you look at the history of this particular location, the applicant actually knew that they had to apply for a permit for the rooftop addition, which they did in 2011, and then withdrew it, and then sought only a permit for interior alterations, and then completed rooftop additions and the extension in the rear. So we know they knew what they were supposed to do and just decided to violate the law. However, that said, we're stuck with our standard, which is, would we have approved this if this had been brought to us in the first instance? We have a clue because something happened in 2011 suggested they should withdraw that application. However, it's our own current personal decision-making here. And I happen to agree with Landmarks West and the community board that I would never have approved a 4-foot flat stucco addition to an already obtrusive flat stucco wall at the top of this building with a service ladder as its only feature. It was bad enough, and what was done made it worse. And I can't imagine myself having approved that at the time. So, so I cannot vote in favor of legalizing this.
Okay, and so you don't find that the stucco and detailing they're adding mitigates the presence or?
If the 4-foot addition isn't there, then that doesn't even make any sense.
Okay, all right. Okay, and so because, and any comment on the rear?
The rear extending beyond the plane of the first level, if I had seen this originally, I would have objected to the rear addition extending beyond the plane of the third level of the building next to it.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Oh, I wonder, do we assume that the extensions in the rear were approved by the building department?
I don't know that we can, I don't know that we know that. I don't know, Caroline, if you have any information about that.
Well, this is a complicated situation, and maybe John Weiss can help us out. There apparently was an application filed for interior work only. The permit was issued, however, drawings that showed an extension were perforated in error by the LPC. So the permit itself does not talk about an addition, but the drawings were perforated. So the buildings department apparently, John, or maybe John can, he's been involved as well.
Right, so it does seem like what was filed at DOP and permitted at DOB were the rear extensions.
It's not clear that all of those rear extensions were permitted by DOB. It's a very murky history at the department buildings on this. But they do have a clean objection sheet in terms of meeting zoning at this point.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part. Say that again.
These additions do comply with zoning. They have an objection sheet as part of this application, but it's unclear what was approved by the Department of Buildings previously.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, it seems like I don't know why we would approve, as Commissioner Gustafson said, either the kind of the violations or the on the rear, but I feel that they're less sort of landmarks issues than it appears to me to be, that there's something else missing that's more of a DOB issue. And so I feel like it's almost like not our purview exclusively. And so I want for that complication to come back in, because it doesn't, for me to say that the parapets are too high sort of misses the point. There's a bigger violation here. So, or it seems to me, but I cannot tell. I do think that Commissioner Gustafson is right that that extension of the 4 feet in the front is sort of not acceptable. But I do think that the way that they've tried to remediate it with the stucco could be appropriate, even though, again, that's at odds, because I think if we were to make a decision now, if this were brought to us right now, we likely would not approve that extension, that extra 4 foot extension. However, I do think that it is remediated a bit by the application of the stucco in the front. So do I find that appropriate? I could potentially find that appropriate, though the underlying issues seem to be more problematic. So far, the only good thing I've found is that I'm reminded of eclair pastries, and we will miss it and miss their guest book. So maybe others can help me.
Okay. Okay. And I think, I know it's challenging because there may be DOB violations, but as always, we go before the Department of Buildings, so we'll have to take a stab at this first. Okay. Commissioner Chapin?
Me?
Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry, Sarah. I was focusing on the discussion. Well, first, I find that, I think that obviously it was unfortunate that the changes were made and before the designation even to, put that sort of wall up as an additional floor above. And it had already been extended, but at least in a suitable design fashion. But I think extending it further is not the right solution here. I feel that the effort to line it up with the other buildings doesn't make any sense to me, because they're not similar buildings. They don't have anything in common with this. The original building was much smaller, and it really, the goal to line it up with the other buildings to me doesn't have any worth in the situation. I think that it does need, if there continues to be that sort, whether it's blank faced or not, and I too had thought about possibly fenestration or something, but the top floor on the front facade needs to have some character that relates better, given that it's really there's no way it can look like just a rooftop accretion. It's part of the building, so it needs to look more like it. And I think that the effort to try to detail it in some way with stucco and make it appear to relate to the bottom is a good idea. I'm for that, but I would not extend it further. Ideally, I'd just take it off, frankly, but that isn't going to happen. So I don't think anyway. And it was there in 1998 designation. So I mean, as far as the height, I guess, the original shorter height. The back, I think obviously the parapet walls are too high. At the moment, I guess I don't have much comment on it is cleaning it up somewhat to align it. I don't know, it's a little hard to tell from the diagram, as one of the others asked, if it could align more closely perhaps with some of the adjacent buildings. I think that would be helpful. But certainly the parapets are ungainly and unusual and kind of inappropriate. So I guess those are my principal comments at the moment. I'm not very keen on legalizing this, but at the same time, I'd like to see this get into, I'd like to have something here that fits better in the context of the neighborhood and in particular in the front facade, which is so important. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Thank you. This is a tough one, as others have said, but my view is a little bit different. Considering that the front facade had the addition in the first place, I think that if the design were right for the vertical extension, I believe that I could have approved it back in the day if it were applied for in the proper time. I think that the gesture of the stepping centerpiece is a good start, but I think that a little further exploration is worthwhile. People have suggested fenestration. I believe you're allowed to have windows and egress stairs. You're certainly allowed to have them in the custodians' apartments. I think exploring the cornice to try to make a better relationship with the neighbors would be worthwhile. There's plenty of precedent for additional levels of development in the existing building itself. The granite medallion, the little wave motif at the top. This is a very beautiful, interesting building. And I think that if you were seeking to expand it in a sympathetic way, there are plenty of things you can do to make it have a stronger relationship with the base and look more integrated. So I personally think that an addition on the front could be approved if its relationship with the neighbors and the existing building were strengthened. In the back, my initial reaction was that this was completely inappropriate as a volumetric addition. However, it sounds like we've got fingerprints on it and that it's not so simple. And when I look at I think that this diagram is unfortunate in the applicant's disfavor in that it really focuses on the two neighbors. Whereas if you look at the block itself, the block is full of very large buildings that go very deep into the block. So I wouldn't say that this would be a non-starter had it applied from scratch. So I could imagine approving it in its volume. However, the fenestration, I guess, might have been okay, but the parapets definitely should come down. The air conditioners, I don't think we've ever approved a situation where you have surface mounted air conditioners with wires hanging all over the place on a residential or mixed use donut. And I would strongly suggest that the applicant consider putting those on the roof or putting them in some other place where they're not visible eyesores to every neighbor. And I also think that the finish of the back should be explored, whether it's a complete stucco around it or something to make it more uniform and more appropriate to a mixed-use donut.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Chen, I don't know if you were with us for the entire presentation and if you can prepare to comment.
No, I was here during the whole time, just
Okay.
logging in the back after lunch. I agree with Michael and the previous comment. This is one of those what ifs. And unfortunately, it is, it is what it is, and it's forcing us to take a hard look at it. Regarding the front, as Michael correctly pointed out, the commission needs to decide what do we want to do with the front. And I think that if you want to make it contextual, as Michael suggested, having window, that's a different approach than currently. This is the existing condition, and we just did modification by removing the ladder, and this is that, and that's a question for us to decide collectively. As far as the back, and I think Michael keenly observed this thing, is obviously the isometric diagram is doing a tremendous disservice to the applicant at this moment because it focuses on if the application has come before this commission, we would have asked him to set it back at least a couple of notches. And that the thing, and obviously one thing is quite clear, the parapet is too high, it should be reduced, either change it to railing or something else. And I agree with Michael about the air conditioning. I don't think the commission would have ever approved the kind of wiring dangling over the edge. And so that is the thing. So I look forward to hearing what the rest of the commission thinks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland.
Yes, I can't approve this as is either. I think the facade we would not have approved as it's been designed or built, so I can't go along with that. And in the back, I think the addition that was made is out of scale with what I would have suggested. So there've been a lot of other issues that have been brought up, and I don't need to harp on them either, but it's design in the front and massing in the back and design issues in the back, I think, that make it impossible to approve for me.
Okay. Great, thanks. And Commissioner Jefferson.
Yeah, I see the front and the back. The back, I can approve the volumetric proportion of that, but the accoutrements on the back facade have to be cleaned up. And I think the parapet walls are too high. The front, I cannot approve at all. I think it needs to be thought of in terms of fenestration, but also color. I mean, so the color of it with its neighbors. So it needs a lot of work.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so I think where we are today is we are not prepared to approve this. I think there are some commissioners who would not approve even the 4-foot extension at the front, but many who would if the design were different. So so that's maybe a direction one could pursue. And then at the back, I think that generally there's support for additions. It may be that the volume needs to be reduced in some form, or the mass of it needs to be reduced in some form, and the design also can be looked at. So I think what we'll do today is take no action and give you an opportunity to restudy the changes, the proposed modifications you're making to the work, to try to sort of retroactively have them fit into their context. So why don't you continue to work with the staff and come back to us with a revised proposal based on the comments that we've heard today. And I just urge you to move quickly, as this is a violation. We don't want this to fall by the wayside. So we will step up enforcement if you don't continue to work with us. So I urge you to keep working with the staff and come back to us as soon as you can with a revised proposal. Okay.
Understood. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to public hearing item number 9, LPC 22-01875. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1232, Lot 7502, 500 West End Avenue in the Riverside West End Historic District. A Renaissance revival style apartment building designed by Schwartz and Gross and built in 1914 to 15. And the application is to establish a master plan governing the future installation of windows.
The applicants have joined the hearing. You just need to click on the slide and use the keyboard arrow keys to advance, and just state your name for the record and you may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. Nora Martins from Ackerman LLP on behalf of the applicant 500 West End Condominium Co. for a certificate of appropriateness for a master plan for window replacement for the existing building located at 500 West End Avenue between 84th Street and 85th Street. I'm joined, I think this is a slightly outdated version, sorry, of the presentation. It's the same, I just realized the cover slide has the community board on it. Apologies for that. I'm joined by Massimiliano Galassi from Howard L. Zimmerman Architects, who We'll provide further detail on the proposed windows later in the presentation. Obviously, we'll both be available for questions. The subject building is located in the Riverside West End Historic District Extension 1, designated in 2012, and is not an individually designated landmark. As noted in the Historic District Designation Report, the subject building was designed by Schwartz and Gross in the Renaissance Revival style and constructed between 1914 and 1915, with multi-light wood windows as shown on the historic tax photographs here on the next slide. You can see the 1980s photographs, the 1940s, and then a 1915 photograph, which is not a tax photo, but does very clearly show the original historic multi-light configuration. At the time of designation in 2012, the original windows had been, multi-light windows had been replaced with the current 1/1 double hung aluminum window configuration as shown in the existing building photos here on this slide. You can see the front facade, fronting West End Avenue. The master plan window replacement proposal seeks approval to replace all of the existing 1/1 double hung windows. Well, almost all, you'll see in the window details, almost all of the existing 1/1 double hung windows with 1/1 double hung windows. While the proposed windows will not be restored to the original multi-light configuration, this proposal does bring the windows closer to the historic condition by restoring several existing paired windows to the historic single windows, and in the proposed finish and details, including the paint color and brick mold. As you can see on this slide in these close-up building photos, the building facade is quite ornate and features many decorative elements, including an elaborately framed main entrance, molded terracotta window sills with decorative brackets, horizontal decorative band courses, brick masonry patterns, decorative Juliet balconies, and projecting terracotta water tables located above the 4th floor and between the 11th and 12th floors. With such an ornate facade, the historic multi-light windows are not a defining characteristic of the building's design. The next two slides are examples of other buildings designed by the same architect, Schwartz and Gross, and built on the Upper West Side in the same time period that had original 1/1 windows per the designation report and historic tax photographs. These buildings include 271 Central Park West and 111-115 West 71st Street. The next three slides illustrate LPC precedent where certificates of appropriateness were approved for 1/1 replacement of original multi-light windows for three buildings, all designed by Schwartz and Gross on the Upper West Side. The first is 370 Riverside Drive in the Morningside Heights Historic District, where the certificate of appropriateness was issued in 2019. The second is 150 West 79th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District, where the certificate of appropriateness was approved also in 2019. And finally, and most similarly to the current application, 771 West End Avenue, very similar building in terms of design, style, and ornateness. The LPC did approve a master plan for window replacement to replace the original multi-light windows, which are actually 12/1 windows, very similar to the current application, with 1/1 double hung aluminum windows in 2020. The next few slides show the building facade with the proposed window configuration. You have the west elevation, south elevation. I'm going to go through these quickly, and of course, happy to return to any of these slides if there are any specific questions. East elevation, north elevation, and then the east and west elevations at Courtyard 1 and Courtyard 2. The next several slides show the proposed window types compared to the existing and historic window types. You have historic on the left, proposed in the middle, and then a photo of the existing window on the right. Go through these quickly again, as nearly all the windows are proposed as the same 1/1 double hung configuration. But as you can see on these first two slides, window type P11 is an existing paired window that's being restored to the single configuration. And on this slide, window type P13, again, is a paired window being restored to the single window configuration. And just one other window of particular note is window type P110, which is an existing stained glass window, which will be restored and maintained. It's currently existing and a historic window that will be kept in the proposed facade. I'll turn it over now to Massimiliano Galassi to go through the proposed window details and also the proposed paint color to conclude our presentation.
So
just gotta get up to, I went too fast.
okay, so am I on mute? Yeah. Can everybody hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you. Just state your name for the record.
Yeah, my name is Massimiliano Galassi. I am a senior project manager at Howard Zimmerman Architect. What we did, we opened a probe to find the original. We found some original profile and some original frame underneath some aluminum coverings that they were on the facade, and we were able to find the original profile of the frames. So what we are proposing is to replicate exactly the same shape in aluminum in order to meet the energy code. And of course, since the aluminum frames have different characteristic, technical mechanism, some modification need to be made in order to fit the glasses and to slide the windows. But we minimize that as much as possible. And if you look at the left side, you have the original wood frame with all the dimensions. On the right side, we have the proposed new equivalent in aluminum. You can see that all the visible parts are exactly identical, except for the attachment of the glass that is a little bit wider. But what you're gonna read is gonna be pretty much the same shape that you used to have in this building before the windows were replaced. So we are proposing to go back to the original profile. Pretty much the first two big drawings are the mullion. The second drawing is for the base of the frame. Am I allowed to slide? No. Oh yes. Then we have in these two details, we have the top frame and we have the jambs. Let's see if I go. I'm not. Okay. And then,
Nora's still controlling the.
oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, and again, I apologize because I think actually one detail slide's missing from here. There was a more updated presentation that was provided, but must have been a mix-up in the upload. So these are the two slides that we have here.
Yeah. So this is on the left side, you have the historical profile, and on the right side, you have what is existing right now. So we are going to remove all they cover the original profile with these new trims. And what we are proposing is to go back to the original shape, which is the first drawing number 1. And in the proposed frame that you have in the drawing number 4, we're going to go back to the same exact configuration, visual at least. Of course, on the inside, what's inside the wall is going to be different. Also, if we can slide to the colors, we don't know the original color. We were only able to see a black and white picture that was taken during at the time of the designation. It looks like in the black and white pictures, the only thing that we see is a light color. So we are proposing to use this light brown, which in our opinion, at that time, they probably had a wood color. They were trying to treat the windows to look like wood. So we're trying to go back to a wood color, light wood color. And in this case, we are using a color that was previously approved by LPC for another similar building. So Nora, if you can go to the picture of the original picture in black and white, just to have a reference. So we interpret the picture like usually pictures, the frames it looks lighter than actually it is because of reflection. So in the picture from 1915, the third picture in this page, you see that the frames are quite light in color, but we don't know the actual color. So we assume it was like a light brown. And that's why we picked that color. We also picked that color because it was previously approved by LPC for another similar building. And we assume that it's appropriate.
And lighter than the existing windows.
Yeah, the existing one is almost black. So it's going back closer to what it used to be before.
Thanks. That concludes our presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you. And just to be clear, there is no sort of hidden window. Well, I suppose you have some brick molds underneath panning, right?
That's
So-
what we found. We didn't find existing windows. We only found the existing frame. Yeah.
But maybe one could do a little scraping of the paint on the frame to confirm the color. But I think generally speaking, for this period, a color that's comparable in value and tone to the masonry or slightly darker is what we have typically seen. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire.
What we've found in the number of buildings of this era that we've done is that if there is a limestone trim with buff brick, typically the window frames and sash would be similar to the limestone color. It would be much more of a buff than a brown. I think they need to do finishes analysis on this.
Okay, great. Okay, other questions, commissioners, or thoughts? Okay, so why don't we move to public testimony and then we'll come back to the applicant. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And I'm going to turn it over to Sasha Seeley, who will take us through the testimony. It seems like we do have a panelist with a hand raised. I'm trying to figure out who that is.
So I do have a few signups for this
Okay.
item. I'm going to start off with John Graham from the Victorian Society. John, you should be in the meeting. You can go ahead and unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes. Let me ask you. Oh, perfect. Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the VSNY. The Victorian Society in New York opposes this application. The original sash on this building were wood 12/1, and on the triple windows were 9/1 and 3/1, all with a light painted finish. That is what should be restored to the building. Even if one were to concede on the material, there is no reason to accept the wrong configuration and finish color. It is our view that we should treat with respect the original architect's vision for any building worthy of landmark designation. This is especially true when the feature in question is a significant and carefully considered part of the original design. As far as the color, we believe that buildings with light stone and brick cladding often had cream-colored paint on the windows. It's irrelevant to a determination of appropriateness for this building that other buildings from this period originally had 1/1 windows. We'd also like to say it's also irrelevant that there are bad precedents shown on the Commission's approval for 1/1 sash on buildings that originally had multi-light sash. Bad precedents should carry no weight in current deliberations. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Next, I will be calling on Sean Corsandi from Landmarks West. Sean, you should be in the meeting now. You can go ahead and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee is always excited when applicants take the initiative in making long-range plans for the stewardship of their landmark properties. As is often the case, we use this as an opportunity to ask for a return to the original design as much as is feasible, understanding that the profiles in aluminum will never exactly match the wood originals. Although it should be noted to their credit, this applicant's LPC 1.00 shows it can come very, very close. Here again, we would ask that the original multi-light over one configuration be codified as the standard to this landmark so that in time it will conform to the original intent rather than being forever wrong. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee recommends approval of this application with that slight modification. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to next call on Historic District Council. Promoting you to panelist. Okay, you're in the meeting. You can go ahead and unmute your mic and state your name for the record.
Hi, this is Kathy Brill speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. The proposed plan to implement a configuration of 1/1 paned windows instead of the original multi-pane over 1 windows is completely inappropriate and unacceptable. HGC believes the master plan should instead be the restoration of the original window configuration. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'm going to take a glance over and see. I don't see any more hands raised for this item, and that concludes the signups as well. So, okay.
Okay, great. But I think we did also get, hang on a sec, let me go back to I think we did receive some additional written testimony. So Community Board 7, Manhattan Community Board 7 submitted a resolution recommending approval of the application. And we also heard from the West End Preservation Society, and they also support this application for a master plan. Okay, so let me turn back to the applicants and ask if you would like to respond to some of the comments that we've heard.
We appreciate the testimony. I think our presentation addressed these concerns.
Okay. All right, thanks. So commissioners, if we don't have any final questions, I'm going to request to unmute you all so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. And Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And this is, as we all know, a discussion we've been having, a very thoughtful discussion we've been having, especially in recent years. We know the commission has a long history of approving master plans for 1/1 windows in buildings, apartment buildings that originally had multi-light windows. And in more recent years, we've been a little more discerning and looked at the building style and level of ornament to determine whether the building's ornament and facade treatment in itself represents the style enough that the windows configuration isn't that critical. And in particular, I think was shown at 271 Central Park West was another Schwartz and Gross building that the commission, similar in design, and the commission approved a 1/1 double hung window because it was noted that in another very similar building, the commission approved the original architect's original design included a 1/1 double hung window. So the fact that this particular architect was using 1/1 double hung windows in similar buildings they were designing at the period has been a reason the commission has found them to be appropriate in cases where buildings have enough ornament and other details to reflect the style. And, and we're often mixed on these conversations. And so I expect the outcome to be similar to that. And I tend to follow the sort of evolving precedent that we've laid. And so I would support in this case the 1/1 based on the level of ornament and the precedent of the historic example, which is very similar. Commissioner Bland?
Yes, here I am. I'm in your camp as well. But, these are difficult things, and I think different ones of us around the table see it differently. But I continue to think that there's enough detail on this building to allow it to parent another Schwartz building that is nearby. So I can support 1/1, but a little bit reluctantly, I must admit.
And I would note, part of the reason is that we are getting back the profiles that will add texture and articulation. And I do think that it is critical that they look at those brick molds that are beneath the cladding and do some finish analysis to determine the right color.
The color, I think, is critical. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Commissioner Jefferson.
I'm always torn about this issue for two reasons. One, I respect the architect's work, and I think we should go back to that, to the original source. And I also feel if I was living in these apartments, I would like 1/1 because I like more light. So I am stuck on these issues. And every time I get one of these, I'm confused and don't know which way to go. And the last two times this issue came up, I voted with the 1/1. And in this case, I'm leaning that way. So.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson.
Well, Chair Carroll, you said we've been a little more discerning in our recent decisions. Well, I think I'd like to be at least as discerning as the Victorian Society and the Historic Districts Council. And I do agree with the quotation, forever right or forever wrong. So I think it should be multi-light windows here as well.
Okay, great. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Well, I typically, and in most cases, do think there should be a return to the original configuration. Here, I agree with you, Chair Carroll, that there is enough ornamentation and in the building, and there are precedents and examples of a change to the same architect's building. So I think in this case, I can find the replacement of all of the windows with 1/1.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
I agree with others that it is, these are very difficult decisions. I was thinking, look, they're replacing the brick molds and they're doing all this work to come back to that original configuration. And why not do 6/1 instead of just, a 1/1 on the, and obviously it'd take forever to get it done, but, maybe anyway, it certainly did add something to this building. I'm somewhat persuaded by the discussion that we're having about, I always do look at the ornamentation issue and that perhaps this building can't sustain having the 1/1. I'm feeling regretful that it can't go back to a closer approximation of the original. So I'm still a little bit divided and waiting to hear what a couple of our other people say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I'll give you a wild guess what I would say. I would say what I've said before. If the architect decides to wear a blue tie on Monday and a red tie on Tuesday, it doesn't mean that he should have to wear a red tie every day. If he chose multi-light windows for this building, and he had all the windows at his hand, he could have chosen single, 1/1s, 2/2s. He could have chosen anything he wanted, but he specifically chose 9/9, 9/1, 12/1, a very unusual window for this building. So I can't second guess that by any means, first of all. Second of all, I guess ample is in the eye of the beholder, but I would say that on a scale of decorativeness, with the Apthorpe being a 10 and a white brick Upper East Side being a 0, this is this is not above 5. I think this is a relatively lightly decorated building. So I would say, and not only that, I think that it's great that they did the details correctly, but I don't reward them for doing their job by letting them not do the right job with the number of mountains. I don't see that as an offset. They should be able to do both. And in terms of what Everardo said, I would love to be in a building that had those windows. Let's face it, you're not getting Hudson River views on West End and 84th or 85th. You're getting nice West End views and sun, but the quality of light, the quality of view that those muntined windows give, Bob Stern used to call it like a picture frame on the city, and it's a very important piece that we put back. And if it's good enough for the concourse, it's good enough for West End Avenue.
Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith.
I completely agree.
Okay.
I think that also looking at the photos, that some people the windows are very wide, and I think that's another reason that the original architect chose that configuration to break down the scale of those very wide windows. And some people in the replacement took a single window and put in 2 side-by-side windows. I think that's a testament to the fact that it doesn't work as a single one over one window. So I think they should go back to the original configuration, and that they should do a paint analysis to get the paint color right.
Okay, Commissioner Devonshire.
I agree with my 2 former colleagues. I believe it should be a multi-light window. The fact that they're replicating a molding profile from the sidewalk isn't going to mean a thing in terms of the visual perception of this building, but the multi-light windows certainly will. And so I think it should be returned to that. We have an opportunity here that is golden. I also think that the applicant should be required. They should have done one before, but they now should be required to do a finishes analysis of the windows that are extant.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
You have a majority that have decided that on this case, so I would defer to the majority.
Okay, so I think we don't have 6 in either way. So we're going to take no action today. The applicants, should you decide to match the original configuration, in addition to continuing to do some more study on the finish using the remaining brick molds, that would be eligible for a staff level approval anyway, and you wouldn't need to come back. But we'll take no action should you decide to propose some other configuration that is not an exact match to the historic configuration and wouldn't be eligible for a staff level permit. Right, so we'll take no action and you can continue to work with the staff. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move to public hearing item number 10, LPC 22-01335, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 150, lot 12, 78 Reade Street, aka 177 Church Street in the Tribeca South Historic District. This is an Italianate style store and loft building designed by James H. Giles and built in 1860 to 61. And the application is to install storefront infill and signage.
The applicant has joined the hearing. You just need to click on the screen, advance the slides, state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Carroll and Commissioners. My name is Robert Bianco with PKSB Architects, representing the owners of 78 Reade Street in the Tribeca South Historic District. The building is located at the corner of Church Street and Reade Street and directly abuts the Historic District line. It was originally built as 2 separate buildings, one corner building and one L-shaped building that fronts onto both streets, and the 2 buildings were combined in the early 1900s. Our scope of work is focused at the Church Street facade of the L-shaped building, where we are proposing to remove existing storefront infill, remove existing freight elevator entrance located at the sidewalk, lower the first floor to sidewalk level to provide barrier-free access, and replace and install new metal and glass storefront infill. Looking at the Reade Street streetscape, the current building entrance, main entrance, is located at the L-shaped portion of the building, and is flanked by two other retail storefronts on either side. Both feature single paired doors with display windows on either side with bulkheads. Looking at the 1940s and 1980s tax photo, unfortunately, the Church Street storefront is partially obscured in both photos, but we do see the current freight elevator in the 1940s tax photo. This was present prior to designation, although it's not original to the building. And this is the current condition of the Church Street facade. Original cast iron columns on very tall bases exist, and there is a raised entranceway at the center portion, going up to about 3 feet above the sidewalk level to two smaller retail stores. Existing freight elevator entrance at the sidewalk level at the southern bay. Some additional photos of the different conditions at each bay. The current elevator doors are fairly deteriorated. Again, these are not original to the building, and this elevator shaft has not been in use for quite some time. There is another elevator accessed from the Reade Street entrance that serves all floors of the building. And we did do probes at the the steps at the center bay to determine that these are indeed concrete, not stone, and not believed to be original to the building. We also probed the existing bulkhead infill between the two column bases at the northern bay to determine that there is concrete block behind here, no historic fabric remaining. And in fact, we believe that this bay was actually potentially the original entrance to the building at this facade. There's a bullnose sill at the bottom of the column bases that returns at this bay, indicating that this was a finished condition. And the condition at the other two bays has that same bullnose sill, but it is cut, indicating that there was originally probably a loading dock extending across that has since been removed. And in looking at adding new entrance doors at the Church Street facade, we looked at the other entry doors along Reade Street at this building. There's a variety of conditions. At the left-hand side of the page are the paired wooden double doors to the restaurant space. The center photo is the main entryway to the building. The existing doors are not original. The original doors would have extended all the way up to this thicker transom bar with a single glazed transom above. And the condition at the storefront entrance at the east, taller wooden doors, again, another thicker transom bar that is the same dimension as the transom bar at the main entrance, with a transom panel above with some thicker framing. So a variety of conditions. At the Church Street facade, we are proposing, again, removal of the existing infill, lowering the slab to grade to provide barrier-free access, removing the freight elevator entrance and block wall infill, and replacement with paired doors at the center bay, recessed metal panel bulkheads on either side, large display windows, signage mounted on rails and attached to a thick transom bar directly above the new entry doors, clear glass transom above that, and a zone for mechanical louvers, which will be obscured by decorative mesh at the top of the infill. Just an enlarged elevation showing just the storefront at Church Street. The bulkheads on either side of the main entrance are an average of 18 inches above the sidewalk level. 12-inch cutout metal letters will be mounted to signage rails attached to the thicker transom bar directly above the main entrance doors, which are 10 feet tall, and a zone for louvers at the top of the storefront infill. And this plan is just locating the scope of work in the context of the overall building. Existing and proposed conditions at the ground floor plan. Again, removal of that abandoned freight elevator and a single entrance to one larger store flanked by display windows on either side. Partial sections cutting through the current raised entry bay and cutting through the freight elevator. That infill will be removed. Floor will be lowered. A bulkhead provided with this is the thick transom bar with the signage attached directly above the door, and then the zone of louvers at the top. Existing and proposed wall sections at each bay. At the northern bay, where there is an existing bulkhead that will be replaced with a new recessed panel, metal panel bulkhead. The raised steps will be removed, replaced with the paired entry doors, and then elevator entrance will be replaced with bulkhead and display window. Plan section details showing the condition at the entrance door and cut through the transom above. The signage mounted to rails will project about 6 inches in front of the glass. And I do want to point out that at the freight elevator bay, the removal of the existing block wall will reveal more of the historic cast iron column and will return this facade closer to its historic appearance. Some enlarged details at the bulkhead, transom above, louvers above the clear glass transom, and signage rails. I do want to point out that these details have been modified slightly since we presented to the community board. What was presented, the design that was presented to the community board had the bulkheads flush with the storefront framing, and some members of the committee suggested that we pull that bulkhead out and treat it in the same color as the columns and column bases to give more of a horizontal expression and to break up the very tall vertical expression of the storefront infill. We also presented a slightly different signage scheme. The original design had similar metal cutout letters mounted to rails, but the rails were located at a higher elevation and covered the clear glass transom in the center. We modified the design based on feedback both from the community board and from discussions with LPC staff. We looked at the Reade Street conditions, introduced that thicker transom bar, and modified the detail to have the signage attached to that more solid detail. And just some color chips showing the proposed color scheme and existing and proposed rendered views. The storefront framing will be a slightly lighter gray painted metal. Bulkheads will be painted to match the existing column bases and cast iron columns, signage mounted to the rails, and the zone of louvers up at the top.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Oh, I do see one question. Commissioner Goldblum.
Hi, thank you. Explain, please, the color of the storefront. Lighter gray?
We just wanted to differentiate from the cast iron columns, which are historic. And we felt that since the building at this facade has a little more of the lighter cast stone banding to the south, there was a variety of color in the material palette at this facade.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, other questions? Okay, and why don't we move to public testimony, and we may have more questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
I do have one sign up in advance for this item. So I'm going to call on Historic District Council. Kathy, you should be in the meeting. You can go ahead and unmute your mic and state your name for the record.
Hi, this is Kathy Brill speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. Overall, the storefront proposal is an improvement of what currently exists. However, HGZ takes an issue with the proposed signage. The proposed exterior placement allows the signs to protrude from the building, making them too overstated. The signage should be placed behind the glass on the transom, which will remedy this bulkiness. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me take a look. That concludes the signups, and I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you. And we did receive a resolution from Community Board 1 in Manhattan recommending disapproval of the storefront, and they cite the signage, the louvers, and the material of the storefront framing. Okay, would you like to respond to those comments?
Sure. Part of the revisions to the signage from when we presented to the community board was to pull that projection back a little bit. I think what we initially proposed was projecting about 13 inches. So we did modify that detail, but we would be open to looking at further modifications with staff.
Okay, and you're doing an aluminum storefront, and you're making the storefront windows taller. And I just was wondering what the relationship between that bulkhead, which I think, typically you think of the base as kind of aligning with the base of the columns, maybe with grill work or other windows below. But could you just speak to sort of the length, the dropping of that base height and that what it does with the inside and the relationship to the inside?
Sure. Well, currently the first floor slab is raised up to, it's almost flush with the top of these column bases. Column bases are pretty tall, and we did look at aligning the bulkheads with the column bases, but that would put the bulkhead at almost 3 feet, which was just a little high for modern retailing. So we did propose, we did look at lowering the bulkhead, and you can also see that the current bulkhead infill does not align with the column bases. And I know that that's not original, but that is the existing condition. And the height of, it's about an average of 18 inches above the sidewalk, and that is consistent with the condition along the Reade Street. Just trying to pull that image up. Along the Reade Street storefront at the eastern bulkhead, that would be a similar dimension. This is a different condition because by the time the sidewalk slopes up, we're basically at the that full nose sill that I was showing you, that at the bottom of the bases, that would be where the entrance to this storefront would be. So it's just a factor of the slope of the sidewalk, the height of the column bases, and the relationship to the floor at the interior.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any other final questions? All right, not seeing any. I think we'll move to our discussions. So please accept my request to unmute. Okay, and Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as was presented, this is this L-shaped building and we're looking at the Reade Street side of it. And the proposal is to remove modern infill and install new storefront infill. And as we've heard in testimony and discussed, there's a new configuration, proportions, and level of detail being proposed. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you like to start this one?
Sure. Well, I think it's the proposed is quite an improvement over what's there now. I do have some comments. Excuse me. I think to start with, the use of aluminum is kind of anachronistic with the storefronts that you would typically see in a building like this. And I would suggest that would be better, be more suitable in a wood material. The bulkhead, I appreciate that raising it up to the height of the top of the column base may be too high, but as it is now, it looks quite low, and maybe it could be somewhere in between. And I think that it's more standard for the storefront infill to match the color of the architecture. So I think if not to match it, then maybe not quite such a stark contrast between the two would be better. And I think that the signage overall is very overwhelming. So I think perhaps maybe in one location, maybe over the door, but I think having 3 signs like that is quite a lot for the storefront to take. And perhaps they can work with staff on reducing the scale of the signage.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I think that I agree that wood would be more suitable here. And I think that in general, the proposal is very approvable, that most of the, I think I generally agree with Commissioner Holford Smith's comments, and I think that's probably covers everything. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Goldblum?
Yeah, I think I agree with Ann for the most part. I think especially the signage comment, there should be less. I'm less opposed to the use of aluminum per se than to the detailing of it. I think you can get a more historically appropriate set of details out of aluminum and still keep it within, contemporary storefront materials. But certainly going to wood would be lovely and wonderful. And I would also suggest that they look a little bit more in the district at storefront colors. The clear aluminum just strikes me, or the light gray strikes me as it's going to be glaring.
Okay. Commissioner Devonshire.
I agree mostly with what Ann was saying. I think aluminum could be an appropriate material here if it was painted an appropriate color, and for the cast iron, I realize that blacks and dark colors are hip and happening, but cast iron was a substitute material for stone, and cast iron was painted to look like stone historically, and I think it should remain so. I agree with the testimony that Ms. Brill gave about the signage. I think it should go behind the glass at the transoms, and I think there should be less of it.
Okay, Commissioner Chen. Oh, I think we've lost him again. Okay, Commissioner Bland.
I didn't hear all of it, but I think I heard enough. I think I'm in the wood camp in this case, and one sign. I don't think it has to go behind the glass, but one sign, not three.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson.
I'm in the wood camp, but I'm also aware of the issue of the louvers. The proportions are so off, but you know, the relationship of the louvers to the existing cast iron and to the base. Okay, let me just go. The signage is too large. And I think they should take a look at the louvers and see the proportion of the louvers to the glass, to the column cap, the relations of that relationship between those elements of one we should look at.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson.
I'm in the Bland camp, which I think is the wood and single sign camp.
Okay. And Commissioner Shamir Baron.
I think that if we were to see details for an aluminum storefront that were more refined, I would be kind of willing to look at those, but that otherwise in their absence, I would say wood storefront. I also, when you look at the photograph of restaurant 1803, the bulkhead is practically, it could be maybe 32 inches or something high. And I don't think it's that, I don't think that keeps you from looking in or having the right sight line. So I don't think that that's a terrible thing, but I could agree to their dropping the storefront down again, if that detail around the base of the column is really resolved and clear where one begins and the other ends.
Okay, all right, great. So thank you all, commissioners. I think we have a lot of good comments for the applicants to think about here. I also, just knowing that we have approved aluminum storefronts in buildings of this age and of this sort of type within a historic district, would also support aluminum if the details were improved and had better profiles and texture and the bulkheads were resolved. So I think, we have, and I actually think the signage is not that tall and I think discreetly placed on in a way that won't cause any damage. But I understand that for many of you, the 3 is too many. So I think what we'll do is we'll take no action today. We'll ask the applicants to restudy the proportions and details of the storefront infill. And in addition, the material and or color finish of it, and to look at reducing the signage and thinking about the proportions, thinking about how the louvers fit within those. And I think with some restudy in those aspects, you'll address everybody's comments and we'll have you back as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move to the next and final item of the day, item 11, LPC 22-02139, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 523, Lot 48, 611 Broadway in the NoHo Historic District. This is a Beaux-Arts-style powerhouse and office building designed by McKim, Mead & White and built in 1892 to 94, and the application is to construct a rooftop addition and alter entrances.
Okay, the applicants have joined the hearing. You do have control of the slides now. Just click to advance using your arrow keys on your keyboard. State your name for the record and you may begin.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Hi.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, Chair Carroll, commissioners and staff. My name is Jerry Johnson with the firm of Fox Rothschild, and we're land use counsel to the cable building owners of 611 Broadway at the northwest corner of Houston and Broadway. With me today is Rick Cook of Cook Fox Architects, along with his colleague Simone DeCono and other members of the Cook Fox team. The application before you is to install a rooftop addition with attendant and building mechanical equipment, loading dock, and entrance alterations. The cable building was constructed in the 1890s and is in need of an upgrade in building systems, extensive renovation and restoration work to bring it up to Class A standards, which we hope this application will facilitate. I will turn it over to Rick Cook to walk you through the presentation, who could speak much more eloquently about these details than I can. Rick, take it over.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and thank you to the chair, to the staff, and to the commissioners on this beautiful afternoon. We feel very blessed. My name is Rick Cook. I'm the founding partner of Cook Fox Architects, and we're thrilled to have the opportunity to help the cable building, a building that I think we all have learned to love over the years, ushered into the next generation. We were blessed with this rendering from 1892. The building was completed between 1892 and 1894. And we have this gorgeous rendering from that time period. And I think one of the things that's interesting about it, besides the care to the architecture, and this is McKim White, credited to Stanford White, not just the quality of the rendering of the building and the way the building meets the sky with the cresting, but also the love for a vibrant, intense urban ground plane. So here you can see the horses and the carriages, busy sidewalks, and the cables. And the cable is really important because this is the cable building. And it was actually built by the Broadway and 7th Avenue Railroad Company as the cable building, as the powerhouse for the cable building. So I think also, besides that, its site is really important. It's at one of these remarkable crossroads that we have in Manhattan. So Houston and Broadway, Houston is like 23rd, 42nd Street. It's one of these great crossroads that make our vibrant city work, and Broadway. And this building also fronts on Mercer Street. Houston is a fascinating street in and of itself, very close to our heart. We've been working a lot on the far west side, including working at the St. John's Terminal, the new Google headquarters. But I think the fact that this building sits at this key intersection of Manhattan is important. It also happens to split two historic districts. We'll blow up on this historic district with a bubble. We'll blow that up. And you can see that we have the NoHo Historic District to the north, Soho to the south, and this is the southern anchor of the NoHo Historic District. This site has always been a powerful, important site, going back to the 1820s when it was St. Thomas's Episcopal Church. You can see even here, it was a bustling crossroads at the time. Personally, I've always been fascinated by why Houston looks the way it does, why it feels so unfinished. And it's because it's not a historic street. North Street was off to the right, Houston was off to the left, and we cut this street through Manhattan. And that's why we get this funny jog and the unfinished conditions on Houston Street. But we come back to ultimately Stanford White, and this is also, we believe, to be the first all steel frame building by McKim White, and one of the few buildings that's actually an infrastructure project. Even there, as an office building and infrastructure project, he chose to make a vibrant retail on the ground floor. It was a dry goods store. William Vogel and Sons will open to their friends in the public, their new and spacious establishment stocked with the choicest selection of clothing. You can see they use that same render again, but behind the scenes, hidden back here, Stanford White hides this incredible piece of infrastructure, pulling cables from the Bowery all the way up to 50th Street, pulling this remarkable industrial design. The basement had these 4 32-foot wheels winding these cables that stretched all the way through Manhattan. So buried in this building was this incredible infrastructure at the same time. It didn't work. If it started in 1892, it went into another company. That company went into receivership in part because of electrification. So this is a 1910 picture. And in 1901, the cables are gone and the streetcars are electrified. So the cables were actually there for a very short time period. And now we're back to the 30s, and you can see that there's a few alterations. You can see there's a fire escape on the Houston Street side, and the cars have taken over. From the carriages and the cables, you've seen the cars that have taken over. Why could we ever get a picture this far away? It's because the big tear across Houston Street, this remarkable urban infrastructure project that just blew out the whole center of Houston Street coming along. And you can see the end wall there, the plaster end wall of the scar of a building that's been gone. And that's Frosty Myers, the wall that we still know today. It's a 1973 picture of a Frosty Myers installation there. Going to 2009, we had the opportunity to come before the commission and show this presentation of our building called 300 Lafayette. But we chose to cut this section looking back at the cable building, because I believe that when they cut through, they protected the cable building and they protected the puck building. And that's why there's that funny space as you make that little jog on Houston Street. Okay, the next pictures are pictures of the building as it exists. Unfortunately, there's been sidewalk bridges up on this building for as long as I can remember now, for quite some time, because the facade is deteriorating, elements are falling. Luckily, the owners have put that nice urban umbrella sidewalk shed in, which is an improvement over the old one, but it's certainly not as good as having this building back to the way it should be. And that's what we're trying to do right now. I will start with existing conditions and a series of drawings of what is this building now. So on the left, you see Mercer. On the bottom, you see West Houston. On the right, you see Broadway. First, we're going to cut a section right through the courtyards looking north, and then I'm going to look at a section looking east, cutting through so we can see what the building is now in section profile. So this is the building cut east-west, looking north through those two courtyards, and the bold red line is the as-of-right zoning envelope. Up 85 feet, setback 15 feet, rising up until it intersects with a sky exposure plan. The dashed red line is the height of existing rooftop stuff, house tanks, cooling towers, and things like that that are on the building right now. The next one will cut the other way. So you can see the exact same thing. It's a required 15-foot setback. It rises up and it's got a steeper sky exposure plane, you can see. And this is a nice diagram showing that first cellar is taller than the first and second floors, which were grand retailing floors. You can see that the remnants of that space that was there originally is still built into the infrastructure of the building, and there's even a sub-cellar below that. So the next thing, one of our tasks was to find a way to basically reallocate the floor area from what's currently in the 9th floor. It was called an attic story. It just had those little square windows below the cornice, and create a rooftop addition that doesn't in any way interfere with the composition of Stanford White's cable building. So what we're looking at now is a roof plan of the building showing that all of the rooftop elements are set back more than the 15 feet required, but actually back to 20 feet. We've also worked all the new elevators, elevator machine rooms, and mechanical equipment, and those have all been packed to the north to stay out of our view angle. So the next two will be the identical sections that we showed existing, and this will be the proposed. So what you can see here is the extra distance back from the 15-foot required, the red dashed line we had before, and all the new infrastructure, the elevator run by, the elevator machine rooms, the cooling towers, emergency generators, and the rooftop addition, which is basically reallocated floor area from the old attic story. So now that we're going to have this 1.5 story, 2-story high, 8th floor. Okay, and now the section cut the other way. The same thing, we've decided to be back an extra 5 feet for visibility. And you can see that we've decided that part of the cable building, even though you don't see it from the street, part of the cable building, the way it works and feels in the memory, is a courtyard building. So we've decided to maintain it as a courtyard building. The key to the visibility studies is this blow up I'm going to spend 1 minute on now in that blue box. How do we detail exactly where that floor level is? So if we zoom that in, The building is 132 feet, 5 inches to the top of the cornice line from the average curb level. The cresting goes up 2'5" and 2 foot from that tall cresting that we had. We decided to, besides the 20-foot setback that we've proposed, we also, when we modeled it, it was still a little more visible than we wanted. So we pushed that floor level down 1'7". And then our railings at the upper, up at the upper roof were showing up. So we pushed that railing back to the maximum allowable by New York City code to 6 feet back. So we've tucked it down 1'7". We've moved it back 20 feet, and the overall floor to floor height we cut down to 14 feet roof and move that railing back. And that's what you'll see in some pretty extensive, I apologize, view studies in a minute about what we've modeled. Just a quick diagram about the cresting from the back. So that's the 2'5" high cresting and the 2 foot high cresting. Very important, I believe, for the way that Stanford White intended the building to read. And we were trying to craft our visibility and never really interfere with that complete package that he designed and just have our penthouse look like rooftop stuff beyond. We've built a complete Revit model of the building. And you can see here, this is looking down on it. I will show 4 views of this 3 dimensions with labels. For the sake of time, I don't know if I should go through everything, but let's say that we went through a 15-foot screen wall, emergency generators, cooling towers, elevator pressurization fans, toilet exhaust fans, bulkheads, parapets, and all of those things. And we've now done this in each view, the other view, looking at those same items. When we get to the north, looking back, we've labeled a couple other items. Oh, one other quick thing. This commission approved a 2-story addition on 623 Broadway, but it hasn't been built yet. So this is just a ghost of where that would be if they build that. But because it's not there, we're keeping our lot line windows until we have to lose those. Yeah. Okay. Now the label. There's an outside air, general exhaust risers, and some other things that are on this back wall that are very well hidden. If we go to the Broadway side, please. Same thing, and another click to the ghost of the approved 623 2-story penthouse, which is not there yet. And the labels again. Okay, now the visibility studies. We went a little crazy with the visibility studies, and we're going to try to go quickly and spare you most of them. But what we've done is take a series of computer models and photographs across Houston, 27 views, H1 through H27. Down Broadway, B1 through B10, and Mercer, M1 through M10. So what we're going to do is actually start at H5, which you will not see it, both in our computer model or the mock-up that's built up there. And we'll move until you see it. We'll go into H6, 7, 8, we'll walk around, you lose visibility again. And then I'll stop on H15, which in my opinion is kind of the most important view from the wide Houston view and what you see. And then we'll go on and jump to 17, 18, 21, and 27. And then we'll do something similar on Broadway and Mercer. If you can bear with me, I will talk fast and we can always come back to them if you have any questions. Okay, so this is H5 with a 25 millimeter lens, a picture. This is the existing condition. Next is going to be the computer model, not visible. And the next would be the mock-up, also not visible. So we're going to move up one more. We're going to go through that pattern quickly. So H6, the proposed condition, this is a little computer model. You can't really see it. We're going to turn things bright red to try to see them. So you can just see a tiny bit of bright red at the cresting right there. And then our mock-up. You can just see a little bit of the red of that orange OSHA fabric. Then we're going to move up to H7. Existing. H7, again, the white box, visible. Next will be red box, just slightly visible. And next is, you can see where we're missing a lot of the cresting, existing condition. We're going to restore the cresting in the view. Then we're going to do white box and then red box. So you can just start to see a little of the red box. Go to the next one. And then we move up to H9. You can see the cornice has been falling apart with temporary repairs. Restore the cresting. do the white box, do the bright red box, and do the mock-up. You can just see a little corner of the mock-up. Now we're gonna continue down the street, and you're gonna lose it. So H10, we thought it was important to see how much you see of what we see. So coming this way, very, very little visibility. Continuing down, H10, not visible. H11, not visible. Not visible. H12, not visible. Again, the mock-up not visible. H13, not visible. Mock-up not visible. Okay, so now we get to H14, white box, bright red box. And you can just see this was one of the important ones where we wanted to just sneak it down so that cresting, even though we have the Mercer Street NYU building behind it now, this was kind of the art form where we were tweaking it because we wanted to read just exactly a certain way. So you can see the mock-up of the OSHA fabric there. And then H15 is the one that we park out on for a minute. Existing condition, white box, bright red box, and then the mock-up. And then what we'll do, we did a quick rendering. And what we're proposing in this view is it would be a dull standing seam zinc. So what we'll do is the view you won't ever see will blow up as if we had a zoom lens. We've been using standing seam zinc in landmark districts for rooftop stuff. That it seems to read pretty well with primary and secondary reading. So we're going to zoom in on that and just see exactly the same view, but if you had binoculars and zoomed in, just a little bit of shadow line. We really wanted to read as background. So clearly the dominant thing on the roof form is the Mercer Street building by NYU, but we didn't want anything that really interfered with the composition. Again, you would not see this from the street. This is a zoom. Now we'll go back, and because of the long view angle and the width of the street, that's the white box, then the red box, then the mock-up. And we'll continue H17, same thing, red box, mock-up, and then all the way to H21. You know, it gets lost in urban stuff at this point, red box, mock-up, and then all the way to H27, where you get a very shallow angle, but it's lost in the city, bright red box and mock-up. So thank you for letting me get through all of those. I'll do the same on Broadway. I'm going to stop at B4 and we'll do the same thing where we stop and I'll talk about how we render that lot line condition. So first B2, you don't see it? Not visible, not visible. E3, you can see the existing cooling tower and that lot line condition. Clearly, McKinney and White view this as a very secondary facade lot line condition. That's our massing turned bright red. And now we're going to park out on this one. You can see the cooling tower, the secondary facade, white, bright red, mock-up. And now we're rendered with materiality. And a thought about one of my favorite lot lines we ever did that got covered up was at what we now call the Apple building in the meatpacking district. But this was something that was approved at this commission for how we turn a corner and play with background architecture, modern architecture, lot line conditions. So that was kind of the thinking. I always like that. So we're thinking we could do that with drifting everything north. You can see this is again as if you were looking with binoculars or a zoom lens, but trying to work the proportions of the brick lot line and soften the proportions with the standing seam zinc again. Okay, and then not visible. Visible. You can see you can see some of these have the old sidewalk bridge, so that urban umbrella is much better actually. But we're looking forward to it all being gone. Not visible. Not visible. You just get a little peek of it here. This was the other view that we wanted to be very careful about, which we didn't want to, you know, when you get that first chamfered corner, that first reading of the cable building, we didn't want a hat on top of that. We wanted it to feel complete. And it was just the things you're used to seeing beyond the cresting. Okay. Not visible. All right, and now Mercer Street, because of the scaffolding, we weren't able to get many good pictures, so we're going to convert to computer modeling, if you can bear with us on that. You can see here the scaffolding for the NYU building will come down Mercer. not visible. Mock-up's not visible. And now we're in computer rendering because we couldn't take a picture. So this is our model. You can see in white box and bright red box. The next one down. You can see here, this is computer model, white box, bright red box. We would treat this the same as the other side, and then continuing down the street again. Not visible. Not visible. Not visible. Not visible down Mercer. Okay, so thank you for bearing with me with all of those. We thought it was important to put it in context. How much did you see and from where? We worked really hard to try to respect the reading of the original complete form. The next will just be some blow-ups. I'm going to go through them very quickly. This is just in more detail exactly what it was we just modeled. The standing seam zinc, this gives all the heights, the dimensions. We're obviously, biophilic goodness, going to plant the terraces, indoor and outdoor connections, connecting people to nature and dense urban environment and all that. Okay, I'll go through these relatively quick for the sake of time, all the way around until we cut through the back wall. And I'm now going to shift to the ground plane. I'm actually going to start with something that's a staff level approval, just to set the context, because it's the front door, but I just want to clarify that this is a staff level approval because it's actually a pretty easy accessibility. I just thought it was interesting, and I'm going to run through it quick just to start the ground level. Existing condition, note the torch and the sword and 2 columns and the clock and the grill. Now go to existing conditions, 2 torches, no grill, no clock, and no columns, brackets. And see that little step that's there? That's what's keeping us from being accessible. So we're going to lower the slab inside, and we're going to redo the bronze doors, have a little push plate, all staff level approval. So now I'll start with going around the storefront. That's existing conditions right there. We're going to lower the slab so it's fully accessible to the new core. So we're going to open up the lobby a little bit. So the lobby will now be that first bay. We're keeping the storefront the way it is, restoring all of it, coming around on Broadway. Okay. You can see that there are big shop windows on Broadway. Now when we move around West House, and something interesting kind of happens. Okay, you can see the non-historic fire escape that we've worked with staff to determine that it is non-historic, wasn't original, and that we're going to remove that. And you can see there's a series of things that happen because of existing tendencies that come across. You can see that the ground level stays high, and we open up these areaways with this beautiful kind of palazzo grillage, security grills on them. That's the stair up. Okay, the next. That's the entry, accessible entry up to the theater. And we're proposing, and then that's the entry to the theater on the corner with its marquee. We're proposing to restore all of this back to its original condition. So restoring the storefront, restoring the sills, restoring the bulkhead, restoring the security grills, all the way around. We have no historical photographic evidence that there was any staircase. And we believe, from what we can decipher, is it actually was split with mullions on this corner to accentuate why I made such a big deal out of Broadway and Houston being different. We believe that their architects intended shop fronts on that corner and then brought the tripartite composition down on this chamfer and then down Mercer Street. So we're proposing to restore that. And now the trick is the loading burst. And that's the last big component that I'd like to talk about. Right now, the theater has a recessed series of fire doors there. And there are 2 historic curb cuts in the sidewalk. And the building, if you look up above, was clearly marked for 2 loading bursts up above with the grill work above above. So it was clearly framed to have two similar things and whatever they were. So go ahead. So this is what's there right now. This is a plan section, elevation reflected ceiling plan of the condition that's there right now. Those doors to the theater are recessed. There's a loading dock door there, lots of stuff over time. And I'll show a couple pictures. So this we found off of Google Earth. We couldn't get a good picture, but this is from 2013 of Google Earth. You can see the recessed doors to the theater. You can see the stuff that's happened over time. You can see the grills on both sides. Okay. And all kinds of stuff has just happened. So what we wanted to do was find a solution that allows us to eliminate the fire escapes and have a proper rated egress stair directly to grade without chopping up the building. So this is the existing condition, a photograph of the existing condition. Okay. And this is what we're proposing to do. So we're proposing to leave a recess condition similar to where the fire stair doors were for the loading docks so that we can get that fire exit, the one up against the north wall, to empty out without cutting any stonework. We'll do it right behind the stonework and we'll exit south. Same thing for the new bicycle entrance, modern workplace of the future, bicycle commutation. We're able to get the bike entrance tucked in there. And we're also able to get an egress door out of the loading dock and service elevator by doing this recess. The other thing that we thought we could do, if you go to the next one, please, Simone. If we blow this up, we thought that we could also handle the fact that we're always battling louvers, security cameras, lights, and a whole bunch of other things. And so what we did was look at the existing security grills in those areaways. So on the bubble that just came up is this kind of knotted ironwork of the security element. What we're going to do on the exact same center and the exact same grid, we're going to CNC etch an aluminum plate and do plate and plate behind. So we just get a little bit of relief. And then we're going to paint the whole thing a dull gray. So it all goes into the background. This rendering is non-colored. So picture the paint chip over on the right. If you can bear with me, picture we rendered that dull gray, not shiny like it is over there. And that allows us to remove the back panel and put louver area, put security cameras, put lighting, all of those things that we need to do. And we're going to put a nice dull gray granite up to the face of the loading dock door and just paint the loading dock door out. Okay. And so we have a toe kick, we have a base, we have the granite floor, we have the steel channel that's up above to hide the roll-up grill. It basically gives us a very nice background way to take all that stuff that ends up on a building at a loading dock and hide it inside. And you can see that I think this is supported by the original two grills that were there, that overall with the depth and power of the cornice, the depth of the facade, the depth of these two bays matched by McKidney White's original double bay configuration. We felt pretty good that this was a way to get proper modern egress and new bike entries and cameras and all that stuff that gets to be a heartbreak to try to find a home for and tuck it all into that zone. And then again, this is all white modeling, but to get to the materials, the dull zinc M2 up above, rooftop stuff. Like what we're doing today doesn't interfere with what Stanford White composed at the turn of the 20th century. We'll get a good brick match. Anything that we really want to go background, we have this M3 color, very dull and dark. And then M4 is for us kind of a nice neutral, warm background color. And with all of that said, I wanted to thank you for bearing with us. And I also want to thank the community board too for their supporting resolution. We really appreciated it. And I think in part, all of this work really unlocks our ability to restore McKim, Mead and White's cable building for generations to come. Get rid of that sidewalk bridge, restore the facade at staff level, replace the windows at staff level according to guidelines, replace this cornice, the cresting, and ultimately set the building up for success for many, many generations to come. So thank you very much for letting me get through all that material that quickly. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for a very clear presentation. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I just had a quick question about the one location where there was more significant visibility was on the sort of on the west side down west on Houston, on the west side from kind of Broadway. And I was wondering if you had any studies that showed the roof, the roof addition as being set back rather than 15 feet, more like 20 feet or 22 feet, just on that side where the visibility was more dramatic.
Yeah, I think the most visible is that view that we stopped at. You know, the most visible relative to context was that H15, which is east on Houston from Broadway. And just to review again, we did set it back 20 feet instead of the 15 required by zoning. And we also pushed it down that 1 foot, that 1'7". If you go to 15 again. Yeah, no, go back to that. Go back to the rendered one in context without the bright orange, please, Simone. One more. Yeah, right there. Yeah, so this was the whole trick. We were pushing down, pushing back, and we thought that here we hit that balance where it didn't really interfere with the power of the cable building or the original composition. There was enough other stuff going on. So we did set back an additional 5 feet to 20-foot setback. We also came down from what we originally tried an 18-foot floor to floor for, you know, large penthouse, but 14 was what was deemed commercially viable. So we brought it down to 14 feet. And then that was still showing up a little too much. So we pushed it down the 1'7". So this is the result of a back and forth trying to hit that sweet spot. And I think it's one of the reasons I asked you all to bear with the context of going up and down, that while we freeze this in time, it's very little visibility in the round as we experience the building. So I thought that going 5 foot further back, bringing it down to 14 and sinking it down 1'7" gave us a nice balance.
So just to follow up, so forgive me, I said west when I meant east. So did you actually settle then in this section, the least visible was in fact the 20 feet and the 14 minus 1'7"?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we modeled. We actually modeled up 1'7". We modeled 18, we modeled 15, and we've been working the puzzle back until we hit what we thought kept the integrity of reading clearly the cable building in its complete form and just something in the back, just a little something in the back. So for most places, it's not visible or just a little bit visible. I parked out on that one because I think that's the one, you know, that's that one spot where if you stopped and you looked at it, and I personally, I thought we had gotten to that sweet spot where the cable building and the cresting really worked and the bulkhead didn't interfere with that reading, even though we stopped at maybe its most prominent location. That was, and I guess some of these things are subjective.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, any other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And as always, we start with anyone who signed up in advance, and I will turn it over to Sasha to take us through the testimony.
So I do have a couple signups. I'm going to first call on Historic District Council. I have promoted you to panelist. All right. You should be in the meeting. Kathy, you can go ahead and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. You can unmute your mic whenever you're ready.
Hi, this is Kathy Rill speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. We overall have no issue, any major concerns with the proposed work. However, we found the initial presentation and proposal to be a bit overly abundant, which made it unfocused and confusing. With such a large amount of information, it was hard to see what was actually being proposed before the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And then next I have signed up to speak John Graham from the Victorian Society, but I am not seeing John in the meeting anymore on the Zoom. So what I can do is I did receive their testimony in advance, and I can just pull it up really quickly. Bear with me. And the recommendation from the Victorian.
Sasha, I see that John is here with his
Oh,
hand
okay,
up.
okay, awesome. Just appeared, perfect. Okay, John, you should be in the meeting. All right, John, you're in the meeting. You can go ahead and state your name for the record. Mute your mic. Okay, John.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Sorry for the slight delay. John Graham for the VSNY. First, the Victorian Society must comment on the excesses of the presentation, which we found to produce neither clarity nor efficiency in review. The commission is very good at adopting rules. Perhaps a rule, or at least a guideline controlling the volume and content of presentations would be helpful. Although this is a relatively modest rooftop addition, its placement directly behind a highly decorative openwork copper cheneau will block the sky as currently seen through the cheneau from many perspectives. This effect will, we believe, significantly diminish the presence of this important feature of the building. We think the addition should be further reduced and set back. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. I'll take a look over to the attendees, and that is it for our signups, and I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. And I'll also note for the record that we received a resolution from Manhattan Community Board 2 recommending approval of the sensitive alterations and the restoration of an important building. And that was a unanimous vote. Okay, so Rick, would you like to respond to some of the comments about the visibility? I think you covered a lot of it in your presentation, but if there's anything else you'd like to add now.
Sure. I guess I'd like to say, I apologize for the volume of information presented, but we wanted to err on the side of absolute clarity about how much you would see from where. So I'm sorry if when people have a lot to review that it seemed like it was unclear. It's a very important building, and we wanted to set a little bit of visibility that it does have in context. So I apologize for how much of that there is. I figured we'd err on the side of completeness.
Yeah. We appreciate the thoroughness of the study. Okay, commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, I'm going to start to unmute all of you, or request to unmute you, so that we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. Okay, and Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. And as has been presented, the proposal includes work at the storefront level, including new storefronts that wrap around to Mercer Street and the treatment at the 2 loading bays. And then the work at the rooftop, which has been studied by the architect and set back to eliminate views from over the primary facade from close distances. And the applicant has presented the thoughts on the long views where you do catch it above the roof. So let's begin our discussion. Commissioner Bland, would you like to start this one?
Sure. First of all, I confess to tedium occasionally at long presentations. However, when Rick presents, I'm never tired. I'm never thinking it's too long, and I didn't think it was too long in this case, just to clear the record, at least for this one commissioner. I found everything compelling and necessary. This is a hugely important building, more important than I actually realized. I'm not sure I knew the whole history of it. But thank you, Rick, for telling us the history as well. In a nutshell, though, at the heart of what we're supposed to be saying, I find that this is a very appropriate and modest addition to this important building. This view, I'm glad we have this view, because maybe this is the most damaging view potentially, because it has the backdrop of the cresting. But look at what else is happening, as Rick pointed out in his presentation. The city is the city, and it's engulfing all around and on top of and on side of the building. So I think from this one view and the several others that are relatively like it, this does nothing to depreciate my appreciation for Stanford White's building. So I think this is an excellent proposal, and I'm certainly plan to vote in favor of it.
And I agree from these views that with the restoration of the cresting, I really think that will be the primary reading, and that this addition will sort of blend in with all of the other things that are happening around it. Commissioner Jefferson?
Yes. The cornice and the cresting are the dominant part of this building. And where it meets the sky is important and beautiful. I think the views, most of the penthouse is not visible. But here, where it's visible, I was questioning whether the gray is the right color. I was wondering, what if it was the color of the cresting? What if it was greenish? Would it blend in more? Would I see it at all? Because if you look at the foreground building, which is greenish in color, it blends in with the cresting. So it's just something someone should think about. Is the gray better than a light green? Would it blend in from this view? And of course, it wouldn't affect anywhere else. That's A. B, I think the issue of the loading dock, because of pushing the loading dock back, because of adding the shadow and all this texture within the space of it, it becomes very busy. It becomes almost more busy than the facade itself. It's dominant. So I could see simplifying that, the loading dock. I think it's wonderful that they're removing the fire escape. That's just incredibly wonderful for the building. And I think the entry and the lobby level, it's beautifully done.
Okay, thank you. And Fred, I didn't ask you specifically about the storefronts or the loading docks, and I didn't know if you had thoughts about those.
I should have said something about them because they're important. So much more important, though, to me is the top of the building, actually. But many more people are going to see the bottom. So I think what was being proposed at the sidewalk level was fine all the way around.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Gustafson.
Well, I will admit that I was intimidated by the 3,000-page presentation. But I've got to say, I agree with Fred. before I comment on the substance here. The presentation was so well done. I mean, speaking as a litigator, I just loved his enthusiasm. It made me wonder why so many of his compadres are so somber. Maybe it's the subject. The building is just so enthusiastic in and of itself. But as far as the substance is concerned, I think the best word I could use here is respectful. That's a significant rooftop addition, and in almost every respect, it is completely respectful of the building that it sits on top of. I don't think I agree with Commissioner Jefferson about the green, because what I'm afraid of is that then the actual ornate part of the roof roof line will disappear into the green of the so contrast, I think, is important if there's going to be that this visibility in this particular location. I am perfectly fine with the visibility from, it's very few locations where you can see it from, and I think it's perfectly acceptable to me. I think they minimized in every way. As far as the loading docks are concerned, I have it would take a long time for someone to point out to me exactly what it was that's disturbing about them. I think that as loading docks go, they will disappear as we walk by them. So I think the whole thing is fine, just the way it is.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Thanks. Well, I have a tremendous affection for this building. I worked for many years in Studio 601 on the 6th floor, the arched east side space. And what was so remarkable about this building, everything, the cresting, the exterior, the arched windows themselves, the scale of it, is this courtyard on the inside. And the way that you can actually navigate the building, you really sense the kind of the volume of the building on the interior, because you can walk these very wide hallways and look down into the atrium. I guess what I'm saying is that there's something so particular about it. And I think that this is one of the few projects where the rooftop addition actually relates to something having to do with the kind of the program of this building, almost as though this is the kind of the crown or the expression of that, or the extension of that courtyard. And so it really does sort of make sense. It sort of fundamentally, it's integrated with the logic of the building, it seems to me. I still don't, though, think that to the extent that it's possible, and especially from this east side view, they should push it back, even if it requires an additional few feet, in order for it to really nearly not be visible or almost not visible at all, that there really is not a need to see it, and that the cresting really should be the kind of the final word. On the ground floor, what they proposed is really excellent. John, the loading docks here are gigantic, and on Mercer Street, you feel kind of squeezed, because Mercer Street is narrow, and the construction of this new building across the street, the NYU building, is even more looming now. And so the slight pushback and the refinement of the material in the loading docks is really a terrific thing. And of course, all of the work that they plan to do on the Broadway side is going to just, return the building to its glory. So I think it's just a fantastic project, but I do want to see less of it on top.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Well, yes, it's a fantastic building, and certainly worthy of its preservation. And I think that the addition, though minimally visible, is acceptable. But I think following on Adi's comment, I wonder if this view looks confusing. I believe we're looking at windows in that addition. And perhaps if this view could be limited to just seeing the metal, it would be less confusing. And then you would read the cresting up against the blank metal wall. And then I think that would be much more appropriate. But I think all in all, it's a great project. The storefronts are going to be wonderful. And I don't really have any comments on the loading dock.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
I think obviously an excellent presentation and very thorough. I do think that the rooftop is okay. It is visible from aspects, but mostly from a great distance. And, things typically occur on rooftops. I don't think it's distracting from the building itself because of the clear differentiation and the cresting. And I think that the design of the street level storefronts and loading docks is appropriate and works well. So I think I really can approve this as presented.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
Hi. I agree with, it's always a pleasure to hear Mr. Cook present. He's so effervescent and convivial. It's a pleasure. I think that the work on the roof, I agree with Adi. I think that with a little bit of effort, the profile of the visibility can be etched back a little bit. It reminds me of that project that we saw on 22nd and 6th Avenue that's very close to, I think, Mr. Cook's office, where there was a very large multi-story addition, and larger than this one. And through careful coordination between the visibility and the architecture, modifying the parapet, modifying the first few feet of the building, I don't think you actually need to make it smaller at all. I think you can modify the profile of the rooftop addition to reduce a lot of the visibility and to limit it where it can't be eliminated. I think that his emphasis on the cresting was so compelling that I really wanted, in those views to the west, that down Houston, as you're looking back towards the east, I really felt that those little slivers were fixable. And I think that because the cresting is being restored, it's worth fixing that. So I would suggest they work with staff on that. I don't think it's something that needs to be reshown to us. And I think that their loading docks are great. I just wish them luck keeping them free of people.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Devonshire?
Thanks, Sarah. With regard to the volume of the presentation, we frequently have applicants who give us a 20-minute history of architecture of New York before they begin talking about the actual building at hand. And when Rick first gave us that map of Manhattan, I cringed and I just thought, oh, here we go. But that said, I could listen to Rick Cook talk about architecture all day. And as far as I'm concerned, this presentation was just perfect. We got all the information that we needed to get about the building. I am 100% in favor of this design. I don't think it needs to be shrunken at all. If we could look at the image that's on the screen right now, that the Rhine zinc that he's going to use is actually going to end up being a little bit darker than is shown in this rendering. There was one thing that I am totally against here, and I'm sure I'm going to get trouble from the Friends of Boxwood or whatever it is. If they do plantings on top of that addition, we're going to have a big green fuzzy head that is going to be in competition with the Chenot and the cresting on that cornice, which is one of my favorite cornices in New York City. And so somehow, if we can require that there be no plantings, or the plantings be of a certain size so as not to overwhelm the roof of that addition, I would like to see that. When I win the lottery, I'm going to buy a plane and fly around New York City and drop defoliant on every green roof on an individual landmark that has trees growing on it that exists. So you'll see me in prison.
Okay, and on that note, I think we have talked to everybody, all the commissioners who are present today. And, I think that there's overwhelming support for the work that is happening here in general and breathing new life into this building and doing it in such a respectful and sensitive manner, both on the interior as well as on the ground plane and at the rooftop. And I think that we just are shy of support of it as is. And so in order to vote on this today, I would make a recommendation that you continue to work with the staff to, just modify the profile of the addition to minimize this view. But other than that, I think we have a lot of support for all the components of this project. So I'll go ahead and make this final motion. In the matter of docket number 22-02139, 611 Broadway in the NoHo Historic District, a Beaux-Arts style powerhouse and office building designed by McKim, Mead & White and built in 1892 to 94. This is an application to construct a rooftop addition and alter entrances. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the NoHo Historic District. I recommend approval with a modification, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features of the building, that the surrounding streetscapes within the district have a variety of building massings and heights, which support the presence of an appropriately scaled addition on this robust large-scale building, that the rooftop addition will be set back from the primary facades, thereby maintaining a sense of the building's original volume, that the rooftop addition will only be visible from long distances of several hundred feet or more over the primary facades and will not overwhelm the building or other properties along the view corridors, that the visibility from the Broadway side of the addition and bulkheads, this sentence, let me see, I think there's a typo, that the visibility from Broadway of the side of the addition and bulkheads over the lot line facade and above a shorter building will be consistent with the visibility and variety of rooftop accretion seen in conjunction with secondary facades throughout this historic district, that the materiality and design of the rooftop addition featuring zinc cladding, red brick at the lot line, and simple punched window openings will help the addition recede from view and not compete with the distinct profile of the decorative cresting, that the proposed mechanical equipment situated at the rear roof of the new addition will be and enclosed behind a louvered screen will only be visible from great distances and will be seen in conjunction with other rooftop accretions, that modifying the ground floor bay at the corner of Houston and Mercer Streets by removing the stair, modern infill, and marquee, and installing infill to match the materials and details of the other historic storefront bays along the facades will return this bay to a condition consistent with its historic configuration, that the simple modern design and materials of the new loading dock entrances featuring setback, painted metal roll-down gates, solid transoms, and incorporated service doors will be harmonious with the building's facade and compatible with the history of industrial use at these bays, that the granite paving at the base of the loading docks is consistent with paving material found at other locations within the district, and that the proposed work will not detract from the architectural and historic character of the historic district. However, I recommend that the applicant continue to work in consultation with the staff to study the height and/or profile of the addition to minimize its presence behind the cresting and these long views. Okay, and Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen's not here, is that correct? Yeah.
That's correct.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Enthusiastically, aye.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, that's approved. Thank you. And we look forward to seeing the project move forward. Well done.
Thank you, commissioners. Have a great afternoon.
All right, and that concludes our session for today, November 9th. Thank you to our applicants. Thank you to the public who participated today. And as always, thank you to my commissioners for your wonderful support, dedication, and commitment to our work. Have a great day. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye.
And so we'll ask all members of the public to leave now. Okay, great. So we have we ended recording?
So we've ended recording, but I think I need you, because you're the host, to end the live. I don't have that.